Week 11 of the fantasy football season. Here's a few defense DST units. I would start this week. The first one, the Detroit Lions. So this line defense, even with Aiden Hutchinson out for the season, they're going out there and still making plays and putting points on the board. So the last few weeks, their defense, they've been playing great, I believe, is Detroit. Week 7 in Minnesota, 23 points allowed, 4 sacks and interception. 8 versus Tennessee, 14 points allowed, a sack, 2 interceptions, 2 fumble recoveries, and a return touchdown. Week 9 at Green Bay, 14 points allowed, a pick 6 in that ball game. And Week 10 at Houston, 23 points allowed, 4 sacks, 2 interceptions. I know Detroit, they're going to give up points, mid-teens, mid-20s types of range, but they're creating turnovers. They get into the quarterback. And this week, it's a slam dunk matchup versus Jacksonville Jaguars. They can't get anything going. We know Trevor Lawrence, he's hurt. Mac Jones in their quarterback. We know Travis Etienne, it's been a down year for him. And also Tank Bigsby banged up. We'll see if he plays in this game or not. And also Brian Thomas is banged up and Christian Kirk out for the season with a depleted Jacksonville Jaguar team coming to town. And we know if Detroit gets off to an early 14-point lead and really could start teeing off on this Jacksonville offense, I think this defense once again could go out there, have a big performance. Next DST, the Green Bay Packers. At Green Bay, they were on bye, and now they come back and they got a great matchup this week at the Chicago Bears, where they can't do anything right in Chicago, giving up the 10th most fantasy points to DSTs on the season. Early in the year, Green Bay was amongst the league leaders in turnovers created. And I think this bye week, healthy a little bit, is Green Bay. They're going to get back to the basics after losing a tough one versus division rival, the Detroit Lions. And if this offense don't turn the football over like it has a little bit over the last few weeks, he'll put the defense in better positions. Week 7 versus Houston, 22 points allowed, 4 sacks. Week 8 at Jacksonville, 27 points allowed, a sack, an interception, a fumble recovery. And Week 9 in a wet, rainy ball game, 18 points allowed versus Detroit and a sack. So like I said, Chicago, they're not moving the football. They're not making plays of late as the Chicago Bear offense. And the young quarterback, Caleb Williams, I thought he was turning the page. And then the last 2 weeks, he hasn't done much for this Bear team. So I think Green Bay could go into Soldier Field and have a decent game plan, create a few turnovers, and get sacks on Caleb Williams. So I like them as a start this week. The next start, the San Francisco 49ers is San Francisco. I know their defense has been up and down this season. I know it's a division matchup where you just forget everything and anything goes in these type of ball games pretty much. We've seen throughout the years, no matter the division, but San Francisco, a good unit led by Nick Bosa. Obviously, Fred Warner as well, great linebacker. And the secondary, they just got to tackle better and break up some plays and ball hawk a little bit more as well. Week 6 at Seattle, 24 points allowed. Going back to their first matchup, a sack, 2 interceptions, a fumble recovery. Week 7, Chiefs, 28 points allowed, 2 sacks, 2 INTs. Week 8 versus the Cowboys, 24 points allowed, 2 sacks, 2 INTs. And then last week at Tampa, squeaked that ball game out, 20 points allowed, 2 sacks. So I believe they're going to give up 20 points to San Francisco. But the key is creating some turnovers, and I think they can in this ball game. Geno's amongst the league leaders in passing yards this season for this Seattle Seahawks team, but he's still going to turn the football over. He's still holding on to it at times too much, taking sacks. And the Seattle Seahawks team does give up the 4th most fantasy points to DSTs on the season. So I think Seattle, this score, 20, 27-point range, no doubt about it. But I believe sacks and turnover come in play here for San Francisco. And there's still a defense I will go out there and start this week. And I start the Houston Texans. The Texans I mentioned is a top waiver wire pickup at the position. And this week it's a slam dunk matchup at the Dallas Cowboys, where their offense is a mess, banged up offensive line can't move the football. Now it's going to be Cooper Rush or Trey Lance. We know Dak Prescott out for the season, and even if he's not going to play in this ball game. In the last few weeks, this Texan defense, they're putting up fantasy points and creating a lot of turnovers. Week 7 at Green Bay, 24 points allowed, 3 sacks, 2 interceptions, a fumble recovery. Week 8 versus the Colts, 20 points allowed, 5 sacks, an INT, a fumble recovery. Week 9 at the Jets, 21 points allowed, 2 sacks. And then last week, top 5 interceptions versus Jared Goff in this Lion team. And not to get the win is just a tough one, no doubt about it. 26 points allowed. So they're going to give up their points. But this Cowboy offense can't move the football down the field. And really, they're not making plays. I think this Houston Texan team to go out there and have a nice ball game once again. And like I said, this Cowboy offense can't move the football efficiently. We saw it last week with Rush. And even if Lance is in there, I think Texans will get some sacks and create some turnovers this week. In the 5th and final defense DST I would start is the Minnesota Vikings. So this Minnesota Viking unit's been one of the best units all season long. And this week, a great matchup with the Titans that give up the 3rd most fantasy points to DSTs on the season. So Minnesota, they create turnovers, they get to the quarterback, and for the most part, those points in the mid-teens, low 20s all season long of what they've been giving up. Week 8 was a bad one, though, for them at the Rams. 28 points allowed, interception. Week 9 versus Indianapolis, 7 points allowed, 3 sacks, an interception, a fumble recovery. And then last week, after an early touchdown drive for the Jaguars, they buckled down was this defense. Had a great game, 7 points allowed, 3 sacks, 2 interceptions, and a fumble recovery. So this week, like I said, great matchup at the Titans. Will Levis most likely going to be in there, quarterback once again. Last week, I know that garbage time touchdown at the end and one earlier. Levis, he's taking big hits. He's turning the football over. He's had a couple fumbles as well this season. I think Minnesota, with this great defense, is going to go in there to Tennessee and once again make plays, create some turnovers, and have a nice fantasy day once again. So that's a few defense DST units I would start for week 11 of the fantasy football season.